Good afternoon, class. This video presentation will help you complete pages 4 and 5 of your packet. The first page 4 is your plot diagram, and page 5 is the objective summary that you will write after you're completed with your plot diagram. Page 6 is a rubric that I will use to grade, so disregard that. And now I'm going to help you with this plot diagram. Let's first read the directions. The directions state, use this plot diagram to map out the story. Thank you, ma'am. You may use bullet points and incomplete sentences. Here is a link to a video that explains plot. So I gave you some resources that you can use. Here is a link to a handout that explains the definitions of each of the terms for the elements of plot, just in case you need a refresher. Also, there is a link to a video that explains plot. It's a Khan Academy video, and it's very helpful if you also need to review that. But now I'm going to begin with this plot diagram and help you complete it. So if you click on it, you may have already noticed this with other documents that you need to use a text box to complete it. So we're going to start with the title. I'd rather make a better text box. You guys are probably quicker than I am. Sure. So thank you, ma'am. By Langston Hughes. Make sure that you are writing his name correctly. I don't think he would appreciate you misspelling his name. Okay, great. Now we're going to move on to the exposition of the story. The exposition includes the setting, the situation or background, and the characters. So I'll help you with this as well. So the setting of the story, it takes place in two places. The city streets and Mrs. Jones's apartment. Now, the background basically is it's a theft / robbery occurred. Okay. Move this down a little bit. Move it back up. All right, the characters, there are only two characters. You have Roger, main character. And then you have Mrs. Jones, a minor character. Even though she's a minor character, it doesn't mean she's not important. Minor character means that she interacts or he interacts with the main character and helps to move the story along. So very important to the story. There we go. So that's done. We have the exposition complete. And now I will tell you that I know you may not remember what the protagonist and the antagonist are. You've heard this before. The protagonist is the good guy. the good woman. It's the hero of the story. And the antagonist is the opposing force. The antagonist is the villain or the bad guy or girl. Now, in this story, the antagonist should not be Mrs. Jones. She's not the bad person. And the hero, Roger, really isn't a hero. But in the story, we have these two opposing forces. And Roger turns out to be a good kid at the very end. So even though I'm not in agreement with it, so to speak, I just want to let you know Roger is the protagonist in this story, and his opposing force is Mrs. Jones. And the reason is because he wants to leave. I know he tried to steal her pocketbook, but she will she will not let him leave. She is preventing him from leaving. So that's where the struggle and the conflict comes in. So I just want you to know that this is not the typical protagonist antagonist, because Mrs. Jones actually is a good person, and Roger actually, at the beginning of the story, was not behaving like he should have. So anyway, so when you do this, once you've completed the exposition and the antagonist versus the antagonist, you should go next to the conflict. The conflict is what the story's problem is, the main conflict. Now, you would write it here, and then this will set the story in motion, and it will lead to the climax. Now, the climax is the turning point in the story. And what that means is it's when the character within himself or herself makes a decision, or it's the main character that decides to change. There's a change that the character makes. So, whether or not the character makes a decision and that's within himself or herself, or if the character changes somehow, that's going to affect the outcome of the story. So the climax is the turning point, because it's the point where whatever the character decides to do or does that's different than he or she was doing all along will affect the outcome of the story. And then we can move on to the resolution, which is the end of the story. How does the story end? The last event. How does it end? So I'm going to suggest to you that after you complete the exposition and the protagonist versus antagonist, is to start with the conflict. Now, all of you know what the main conflict is. Don't worry about the rising action. I would go next to the climax. What is that turning point? Where does the main character make a change? Where does that main character decide? What does he or she decide to do differently than before? Then I would go right down to the resolution, the last event in the story, and I would write down what that last event was. Then, once you have completed those areas, then you can decide what from the conflict leads all the way up to the climax. What are these events that are more suspenseful, one after the other, that lead to this turning point? These are the things that move the story along, the action of the story that led to this turning point, this decision changing, and decision making and decision and action changing. And then you can go to the falling action. This is the reason why this is a small section, is because there are a few events in here where the conflict has been resolved and now the story is coming to an end. And then this is the end. Once you've done that, then you can think about the theme. What is the life lesson? What does the author want us to take away from Thank You, Matt? What does he want us to learn about this story? And maybe think about later in life if something arises. It's definitely not thou shalt not steal, or you should never steal, or if you're going to steal, get caught. That's a little bit too simplistic. So therefore, I think because this text is very complex, it's a short story, But the complexities are, example of the protagonist versus the antagonist, because we know Roger is not the hero and Mrs. Jones is definitely not the villain. She's a good person. And also just the climax of how, Roger makes this change. He makes this decision, which you wouldn't expect. You wouldn't expect this woman to, strong arm him, take him to her house, help him out when he just tried to steal her purse. So this is a very complex, and also the resolution, what happens at the very end, is very unique. So what message with all of these different events does the author want us to take away? Once you've completed that, you are ready to write the objective summary. This is a summary that should not include your opinions. This is not where you write how you feel about Roger and what he did and how Mrs. Jones is a great person. That is not what the summary is for. An objective summary does not include your opinion. It's where you basically rewrite briefly in 5 to 7 sentences what the story is about. You want the central idea of the story, the main point of the story. So I've given to you the beginning, how your story should begin with the title, author, and genre. In the short story, Thank You, Ma'am, by Langston Hughes, and you will continue to complete the summary. 5 to 7 sentences long, I repeat. And I think with the plot being done, with some help from me, hopefully I helped you in this video, you should be able to complete the summary with ease. And I just want to wish you guys uh, good luck with this assignment, good thinking, and also to have a great weekend. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me.